My name is Nora Whitaker, and I was 36 years old when I found out my mother-in-law had been putting something in my food. Not salt, not some harmless old wives' remedy, and not a supplement she could pretend she thought would help. It was something that interfered with my fertility treatment. For 4 years, I blamed myself. I blamed my body when the tests came back negative, and I blamed my age when the nurse stopped using cheerful language and started using careful language. I blamed stress when my cycle turned unpredictable. I blamed grief when I sat on the edge of the bathtub with another empty test in my hand and listened to my husband breathing in the bedroom, like sleep had become a country I could not enter. And Diane Whitaker, my husband's mother, sat across from me every Sunday night in her formal dining room, serving me soup in a blue ceramic bowl and saying, "Sweetheart, sometimes the body knows what the heart will not accept." She said it gently. That was how Diane did damage. Gently. She had perfect posture, pearl earrings, soft hands, and a way of touching your wrist that made witnesses think she was comforting you while her fingers pressed just hard enough to remind you who owned the room. The hair sample was not supposed to be a weapon. It was supposed to prove I was not losing my mind. But the lab report came back with timestamps, exposure markers, and one sentence my doctor read twice before she took off her glasses. Repeated exposure pattern consistent with ongoing ingestion. Ongoing, not accidental, not one bad supplement, and not a mistake. When Diane invited half the family to her 65th birthday dinner and began explaining how, I had finally made peace with not becoming a mother. I placed that lab report beside her cake. The paper edge touched the frosting. Her hand moved before her face did. That was how I knew. She knew exactly what it was. Before all of this, my life was ordinary in a way I loved. I worked as the front office secretary at Maple Ridge Elementary, which meant I knew every sick kid's fake cough, every divorced parent's pickup schedule, every teacher's coffee order, and which children needed crackers in their backpacks because dinner at home was not guaranteed. My desk had 2 pencil cups, a chipped mug full of paper clips, and a little plastic dinosaur one of the kindergartners gave me because, according to him, I looked like I needed a guard. I did. I just did not know from whom. Caleb and I lived in a white bungalow on Hawthorne Street, the kind with old floorboards that complained in winter and hydrangeas that looked dead until May. We bought it 8 years into our marriage, back when we still said when the baby comes instead of if treatment works. The back bedroom was painted soft green, not pink, not blue, green. I picked the color myself at a hardware store while Caleb held 3 swatches up to the light and said they all looked identical. There was a crib still boxed in a closet, its cardboard corners softened from being moved twice. There was a tiny yellow sweater folded in tissue paper in the dresser, bought after my first positive test. That test faded 2 days later. I kept the sweater anyway, not because I was dramatic, but because hope needs somewhere to sit. Caleb was a good man, and the way a man can be good and still weak in the exact place you need: strength. He loved me. I knew that. He brought me heating pads without asking. He learned injection schedules. He held my hand during appointments. He once drove 40 minutes at 10:30 at night because I said I wanted fries after a retrieval procedure, and then cried when the drive-thru forgot ketchup. But Caleb had been raised by Diane. That meant he had been trained to hear control as concern. When Diane said, "I am only trying to help," Caleb heard help. I heard ownership. The Whitakers were old money comfortable, not private, jet rich. but rich enough that Diane never rushed through a grocery store and never compared prices out loud. Their house sat at the top of Ridge Lane, all brick, white columns, and clipped hedges. She hosted Sunday dinner like it was court. Same time every week, 6 o'clock. Martin, her husband, sat at the head of the table, but Diane ruled it from the side with a serving spoon. Caleb's sister Allison came when she could, usually with her teenage daughter Emma, who spent most dinners texting under the table until Diane said, "Phone's away, darling," without looking at her. Diane always served too much food: roast chicken, glazed carrots, rolls warmed under linen, and salad dressed in a silver bowl. She kept the house at 68 degrees year-round. So the butter stayed firm and the women kept their cardigans on. My place setting was always near the far end, not insulting enough to name, and not kind enough to ignore. The first few years, I tried to win her over. I brought pies, wore the earrings she gave me, and let her correct my gravy. Then the fertility treatment started, and Diana's interest in my body became public property. How many follicles this time? Did they say your lining looks strong enough? Are you sure coffee is wise? Some women wait too long, Nora. Not blaming you, of course. She said that last part often. Not blaming you. She always blamed me. Caleb would squeeze my knee under the table, and I would press my thumbnail into my palm until the sting gave me somewhere to put my face. Diane had been a nurse years before, though she had not worked since Caleb was 5. She brought this up whenever a doctor said something she did not like. "Doctors miss things," she would say, folding her napkin into a precise rectangle. "I have seen it." Then she would look at me, as if I were one of the things doctors had missed. The first wrong detail was soup, butternut squash soup, in a blue ceramic bowl. Diane started serving it to me the winter after our second failed round of treatment. She said it was easier on my stomach. She made Caleb's bowl with cracked pepper and cream. Mine came plain, smoother, slightly sweeter, and always already placed at my setting when I arrived. "You need nourishment," she said the first time, touching the bowl with 2 fingers. "You are too thin." I was not too thin. I was exhausted. The soup smelled like nutmeg and roasted onion. Steam curled up from it while Diane moved casually around the table, refilling water glasses, adjusting a fork, and brushing a crumb from Martin's sleeve. The spoon made a tiny scrape against the ceramic every time I took a bite. I remember that sound because later, after the lab report, it became unbearable in my memory. At first, I ate because refusing would start a performance. Diane would tilt her head. Caleb would look tired. Martin would clear his throat into his napkin. Allison would study her plate. The room would become one more place where I was the difficult woman. So I ate. The next morning, I woke with cramps so sharp I folded over beside the bathroom sink. Then came dizziness, night sweats, bleeding when I should not have been bleeding, and a dull, strange pressure low in my belly that did not match the calendar my doctor had given me. I called the clinic. They adjusted medication. I missed 2 mornings of work. Diane sent flowers, white lilies. The card said, "Rest, sweetheart. Your body is asking for mercy." I threw the card away and kept the flowers, because that is how women like me survive. We separate the insult from the vase. The symptoms came and went for months. Bad after Sundays, better by Thursdays, then bad again. I did not see the pattern immediately because infertility turns your body into a crime scene, where you are both victim and suspect. Every new symptom felt like proof I had failed. Every doctor's question sounded like an accusation, even when it was not. "Any changes in diet?" No. Any supplements? No. Any medications not listed here? No. Any chance you took something over the counter and forgot? No. At one appointment, my reproductive endocrinologist, Dr. Mehta, frowned at my labs for so long, the paper on the exam table began sticking to the backs of my legs. Caleb sat beside me, elbows on his knees. Diane had driven us that day because my car was in the shop and Caleb had come straight from work. She insisted on waiting in the room. I have been through hospitals, she said, settling into the chair nearest the counter. Another set of ears never hurts. I should have told her no. That is easy to say now. Back then, no was expensive. Dr. Mehta tapped her pen against the clipboard. Tap, tap, tap. Nora, I need to ask this clearly, she said. Have you taken any hormone-related medication outside the plan we made? I said no. Any herbal fertility products? No. Any leftover prescriptions? No. Diane reached over and patted my forearm. Sometimes, she said softly, when women are under this much emotional strain, they forget things. I turned my head toward her. She was looking at the doctor, not me. Her face held sympathy like a mask fitted at the chin. Caleb said, "Mom." Diane lifted both hands. I am not accusing her. I am saying stress can make anyone confused. The fluorescent light hummed above us. On the counter, the little plastic model of a uterus sat beside a jar of cotton swabs. I stared at it because I did not trust my mouth. Dr. Mehta did not smile. Nora has been very consistent with her records, she said. It was the first time in months someone had defended me without making it sound like comfort. Diane blinked once. Then she smiled at the doctor and said, "Of course." That night, I lay awake beside Caleb and replayed the appointment. His breathing was uneven. He was awake too, but neither of us spoke. I wanted to say, "Your mother is not helping." I wanted to say, "I do not want her in another appointment." I wanted to say, "Why do you need me to be polite to the woman who keeps putting her hands on my grief?" Instead, I said, "I do not want Diane in the room next time." Caleb turned toward me and said, "Okay." Just like that, one word. But his voice had fatigue in it, not outrage. He was agreeing to avoid conflict, not because he understood the conflict. That difference matters. 2 weeks later, I found the leaflet. It was not hidden like a movie clue. It was folded behind a stack of guest towels in Diana's powder room downstairs. I had gone in after dinner to wash my hands. My soup bowl had been empty. Diane had served peach cobbler. I remember the bathroom smelled like lavender soap, and the tiny fan buzzed overhead with a dry clicking sound. The guest towels were arranged in a basket, white, rolled, and tied with gray ribbon. A corner of paper stuck out from behind them. I pulled it free because I thought it was a receipt. It was a pharmacy information leaflet, folded twice. No bottle, no name written by hand, just printed warnings in small black type, with one corner softened as if it had been handled more than once. I did not recognize the medication name. I recognized one phrase: may affect ovulation and menstrual regularity. My fingers went cold around the paper. Outside the bathroom door, Diane laughed at something Martin said. Her laugh was low and casual, the laugh of a woman who had just served coffee and was deciding whether to send leftovers home. In glass containers, she expected, returned. I took out my phone and photographed the leaflet on the marble vanity, once with the flash, once without. Then I put it back exactly where I found it. My hands were steady until I locked the bathroom door again and sat on the closed toilet lid. The fan clicked. The paper hand towel on the sink edge lifted slightly from the air vent. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm. Not now, I told myself. Not here. Anger would give Diane a performance. Proof might give me a way out. When I returned to the dining room, Diane glanced at me for half a second too long. "You look pale, sweetheart," she said. "I am fine. You barely touched dessert. I am full." She smiled and lifted her coffee cup. That would be a first. Allison looked up sharply. Caleb stared at his plate. Martin made a small sound in his throat but said nothing. That was the family pattern. Diane cut, and everyone else admired the knife handle. The next morning, my cramps came before sunrise. I sat on the bathroom floor with my back against the tub and opened my phone. The leaflet photo glared bright against the dark room. The medication name looked clinical and harmless until I searched it with the words fertility, cycle, disruption. I will not repeat details that make it useful to anyone cruel. What I found was enough. Not proof, but enough to stop calling myself paranoid. At work, I printed a blank calendar from the school office computer and used a blue pen to mark every Sunday dinner for the past 4 months. Then I used red for symptom flares. I did it between answering phones and signing late slips. A copier jammed behind me. A child cried in the nurse's office because he had swallowed a loose tooth. Mrs. Alvarez from 3rd grade came in looking for more staples. My life kept making normal sounds, while something ugly took shape on paper. Sunday. Red mark. Monday. Sunday. Red mark. Tuesday. Sunday. Red mark. Monday. When the pattern was finished, I sat with my hand flat over the page. Not because I needed to hide it, but because I needed to feel something solid. Before I tell you what happened at the lab, you need to understand what that calendar meant. It was the first time the problem moved from inside my body to outside of me. That mattered. I had spent years being the woman with the failed body. Now I was looking at a schedule. Schedules can be checked. Patterns can be tested. Lies can be dated. I called Dr. Mehta's office from my car during lunch. The receptionist put me through after I said it was urgent but not an emergency. Dr. Mehta called back at 4:40 while I was sitting in the school parking lot watching buses pull away. I told her about the leaflet. Not Diane at first, just the leaflet, the symptoms, the calendar, and the separate soup. Dr. Mehta did not gasp. She did not tell me I was being dramatic. She asked precise questions. Are you safe at home? Yes. Does your husband prepare your food? No. Is the suspected exposure ongoing? I think it happens at my mother-in-law's house. A pause followed. A bus beeped as it reversed near the curb. Then Dr. Mehta said, "Do not confront anyone yet." My grip tightened on the phone. She continued, "If there is a possibility of non-consensual exposure, you need documentation that cannot be dismissed as a family disagreement. Hair testing may show a longer exposure window depending on the substance. It needs to be done properly, preferably with chain of custody." Chain of custody. Those words felt like a door with a lock. She gave me the name of an independent toxicology lab 2 counties over. Not the cheapest one, the careful one. I made the appointment for Thursday. I told Caleb I had a follow-up test and wanted to go alone. He looked hurt. I let him. That sounds cold. It was not cold. It was survival. Because I did not know yet whether he would protect me from Diane or protect Diane from consequences. Thursday morning, I drove to the lab with the radio off. The building was beige, low, and tucked behind a dental office. Inside, the waiting room had gray chairs, a water cooler, and a wall clock that ticked louder than it needed to. A woman in blue scrubs handed me a clipboard. My name looked strange on the consent form. Nora Elaine Whitaker. Date of birth. Phone number. Reason for test. I wrote, suspected unwanted exposure. The pen skipped on the word unwanted. The collection room had a metal chair and a counter lined with sealed plastic packets. The technician explained each step. She checked my ID. She showed me the packet number. She cut a small sample from underneath my hair near the nape of my neck, close enough that no one would see. The scissors made a soft crunching sound. She placed the hair in foil, then into a labeled envelope. I watched her seal it. I watched her sign across the closure. I signed beneath her name. The envelope had a white label with black ink, a barcode, and the time. 10:18 in the morning. That timestamp became part of me. I took a picture of the sealed envelope before it left the room. The technician noticed and said, "Good. Not warm, not nosy, just good." I drove home with one loose strand of hair stuck to the shoulder of my sweater. At a stoplight, I picked it off and placed it in the cup holder. Then I laughed once. Not because anything was funny, because a single strand of hair had more chance of being believed than I did. Waiting for results turned every sound sharp. The microwave beeped too loud. The mail slot made me flinch. Caleb's key in the door sounded like a question. I did not want to answer. Diane called twice. I did not pick up. She texted, "Missed you at lunch with the girls. Hope you're not isolating again." Again. She used words like that, words with rooms built inside them. Isolating, emotional, fragile, sensitive, confused. Words that made other people feel responsible for managing me. I typed back, "I am busy." Then I deleted it. I typed, "Stop pretending you care." Deleted. I typed, "What was in the soup?" My thumb hovered over send. Deleted. Anger would give her a screenshot. Proof would give me the room. So I put the phone face down on the kitchen counter and made 3 folders. One blue, one green, one red. Blue for medical, green for timeline, and red for legal. I printed the symptom calendar. I printed appointment summaries. I printed Diana's texts. I printed the photo of the leaflet. I printed the dates of Sunday dinners from old family messages where Diane had written, 6 sharp, do not be late. The printer made a dry, steady rasp as each page came out. I stacked everything in order and clipped the corners. Paper has weight when your life is on it. The lab director called 6 days later. I was at my desk at Maple Ridge Elementary, sorting permission slips for a planetarium trip. The caller ID showed the lab's main number. For a second, I considered letting it go to voicemail because Mrs. Kendrick was standing at the counter, asking whether her son's inhaler form could be faxed again. I answered. The lab director introduced himself as Dr. Alan Reeves. His voice was careful, not dramatic, careful. "Mrs. Whitaker, your report has been finalized. I am sending the encrypted copy now, but I wanted to discuss the interpretation before you read it alone." The permission slip slid slightly under my hand. I said, "Okay." He verified my identity. Then he said the substance class had been detected in a pattern consistent with repeated exposure over several months. I wrote the phrase, "repeated exposure," on a sticky note, but my hand made the letters too large. He explained that hair testing could not show exact meals, exact doses, or who administered anything. "I understand," I said, "but it could show my body had been exposed repeatedly. During the same window, my cycle had turned into chaos. During the same months, Diane had been serving me separate food." The school bell rang. Children's voices flooded the hallway. Dr. Reeves said, "Given your stated concern, preserve the report exactly as received. Do not alter the file name. Do not forward screenshots as your primary copy. Use the certified version." Certified. That word steadied me. When the email arrived, the screen brightness hurt my eyes. The report was 8 pages long. White background, black type, lab logo at the top. My name. Sample ID. Collection timestamp. Chain of custody initials. Results table. One line looked like nothing. Just numbers, reference ranges, detected. But it rearranged my entire marriage. I printed one copy at work and immediately regretted it, because the office printer jammed after page 6. I stood there with the half report in my hand while the machine flashed red and clicked like it was chewing. "Nora?" the nurse called from her doorway. "You all right?" I folded the pages inward and said, "Yes." My voice sounded normal. That scared me. That afternoon, Dr. Mehta read the report in her office. She did not let Diane come. She did not let Caleb come either, because I did not invite him. The exam room smelled like antiseptic and paper. A poster about reproductive hormones hung crooked near the sink. Dr. Mehta held the lab report by the top corner, her eyes moving line by line. Her pen rested unused beside her hand. Finally, she looked at me. "Nora, this is medically significant." I nodded once. "If this exposure was not prescribed and not knowingly taken by you, then your treatment plan has been compromised." Compromised. A polite word for stolen. "Can you write that down?" I asked. "Yes." The printer in the hall started up. A phone rang at the nurse's station. Somewhere, a drawer closed. Dr. Mehta wrote a letter on clinic letterhead stating that I had not been prescribed the detected medication through her office, that I had denied knowingly taking it, that the exposure could interfere with cycle regularity and treatment timing, and that the finding was relevant to our fertility care. She signed it in blue ink, not black. Blue, so the original could be distinguished from copies. I watched her signature form. That signature was the first human hand that stood between Diane and my body. "Are you reporting this?" she asked. "I do not know yet." She leaned back. "Nora, I am going to say this plainly. You do not need family permission to protect yourself." I looked down at the report. The paper edge had a tiny bend from where I had gripped it too hard. I know. But I did not know, not fully, not until I drove home and found Diane in my kitchen. Caleb had let her in. She was standing at my stove, stirring a pot of tomato sauce I had not asked her to make. The house smelled like garlic. Her purse sat on my counter beside my mail. My mail. Caleb stood near the sink with his sleeves rolled up, rinsing lettuce. He looked relieved when I walked in, as if Diana's presence was normal and I was the weather everyone hoped would pass. "Mom brought dinner," he said. Diane turned with the spoon in her hand. "There she is," she said. "You have been impossible to reach." I looked at the spoon. Red sauce dripped back into the pot. Plop, plop, plop. "What are you doing in my house?" I asked. Caleb's face changed. Diane's did not. "Feeding my family," she said. I set my purse down slowly. "My kitchen is not your kitchen." She laughed softly. "Nora, do not start." That sentence did something to me. Not because it was the worst thing she had said, but because she said it while standing between me and my own stove. I wanted to open my purse, pull out the report, and slap the pages onto the counter between the garlic and the mail. I wanted to tell Caleb he had handed my house key to the person who had turned my body into a controlled experiment. I wanted Diane to see my face and understand she had lost the version of me that explained herself. Instead, I walked to the drawer beside the refrigerator, opened it, and took out the spare key we kept in a ceramic dish. "Caleb," I said, "take your mother home." He stared at me. "Nora, now." Diane set the spoon on the spoon rest, casually. That was the part I hated most, the casualness, as if my anger were a spill she could wipe up. "I think you need rest," she said. "I think you need to leave." Her smile thinned. Caleb dried his hands on a towel. The fabric made a rough sound against his palms. "Mom," he said quietly, "let us go." She looked at him then, really looked. Something passed across her face. Not fear, not yet. Calculation. She picked up her purse. "I only came to help." "No," I said. The word came out clean. She paused near the doorway. I did not say more. That bothered her more than shouting would have. After Caleb returned, we had the first honest fight of our marriage. Not the loudest, the honest one. He came in through the back door, hair damp from the mist outside, jaw tight. "What is going on with you?" he asked. I was sitting at the kitchen table with the blue folder closed in front of me. The tomato sauce had been dumped down the disposal. The pot sat in the sink, rinsed but not washed. A red streak remained near the handle. "Sit down," I said. "Nora, you cannot talk to my mother like that in our house." "Our house," I repeated. "Yes, our house." "Then why does she still have a key?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. The refrigerator hummed. I slid the photo of the leaflet across the table first. Not the lab report. Not yet. Caleb leaned down. "What is this?" "A pharmacy leaflet I found in your mother's downstairs bathroom." He frowned. "Okay, read the warning." I circled. He read it. The color in his face shifted slowly, like water draining from a sink. "Nora, now read this." I slid the symptom calendar over. His eyes moved across the blue Sundays and red marks. Then I gave him Dr. Mehta's letter. His hand shook before he touched it. Not dramatically, just enough that the paper corner trembled. "Nora," he said again. But this time, my name sounded like an apology he had not earned yet. Finally, I gave him the lab report. All 8 pages. Certified copy. Chain of custody visible on page 2. He read the first page standing. By the 3rd page, he sat. By the 5th, his hand covered his mouth. The wall clock ticked above the doorway. Rain tapped once against the window, then again. "Did my mother do this?" he asked. "I do not know how to answer that for you." "That is not fair." "No. What is not fair is that your first instinct is still to ask me to soften the truth enough for you to survive it." He flinched. "Good. Some pain is information arriving late." He looked down at the report again. "She made your food separately." "Yes. She came to appointments." "Yes. She said you were confused." "Yes." He stood so fast the chair legs scraped the floor. "I am calling her." "No. Nora. No." He stared at me. I stood too. "If you call her now, she gets time. Time to destroy things. Time to call me unstable. Time to tell everyone I am accusing her because treatment failed. Time to make you choose in panic instead of truth." His eyes were wet. "I would choose you. You should have been choosing me before there was a lab report." That landed. He looked away. Outside, a car passed through rainwater with a soft hiss. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "Nothing tonight. I cannot do nothing. You have done nothing for years." It was cruel. It was also accurate. He nodded once, as if I had struck him and he had decided not to defend himself from the bruise. "What do you want me to do tomorrow?" he asked. "Write down everything you remember. Separate soup. Her comments. Her attending appointments. Her having a key. Dates if you can. Do not call her. Do not warn her. Do not ask your sister. Do not manage this." He wiped his face with both hands. "Okay. And Caleb?" He looked at me. "If you tell her before I am ready, I will leave this house." He did not argue. That was the first useful thing he did. The next week became preparation, not revenge. There is a difference. Revenge wants heat. Preparation wants order. I ordered 2 certified copies of the lab report. I saved the encrypted email to an external drive. I photographed every page with the date visible on my laptop screen. I asked Dr. Mehta's office for a printed original of her letter with a wet signature. I called the lab and requested a chain of custody summary. The woman on the phone confirmed the sample number and told me the certified packet would arrive by priority mail. When it did, the envelope was stiff cardboard with a tracking label and a black barcode. The postal stamp sat crooked in the corner. I signed for it at the door while the mail carrier held out the scanner. His device beeped once. I remember that beep because it sounded official, not emotional. Official. Caleb wrote his statement by hand first, then typed it because his handwriting got worse whenever he mentioned Diane. He remembered more than I expected. Diane telling him I looked hormonal. Diane texting him articles about women who became obsessed with fertility. Diane insisting I eat before taking clinic medications. Diane telling him, "Nora needs you calm, not indulgent." That word, indulgent, as if believing me would spoil me. Allison called me 3 days before the birthday dinner. Caleb had broken one rule. He had not warned Diane, but he had told his sister enough to ask whether she had ever seen anything strange. I was angry until Allison started talking. "Nora," she said, her voice low, "Mom asked me last spring whether fertility clinics test for outside substances." I sat down on the stairs. "What?" I asked. I thought she was being nosy. She said she was worried you were ordering things online. I told her clinics ask about medication, but they do not search your purse. The stair rail was cool under my hand. "Why did you not tell me?" A pause followed. Then Allison said, "Because in our family, if Mom sounds worried, everyone treats it like love." There it was, the family illness. I asked Allison to write down exactly what she remembered. She did. 2 paragraphs, sent by email, dated and time-stamped. The subject line was, "What?" Mom asked me. I printed it and placed it behind Caleb's statement. Then I called the family attorney. Not my attorney, the Whitaker family attorney. His name was Paul Renner, and he had handled trust documents for Martin's side of the family for years. I had met him at holiday dinners, always in a gray suit, always leaving before dessert. I did not tell him everything. I asked one question: if a person with family medical access and trust authority is credibly accused of intentionally harming another family member, should that be documented before any family meeting? He went quiet. Then he said, "Nora, are you safe?" That question again. It hit harder the second time. "Yes." "Does this involve Diane?" I did not answer. He exhaled through his nose. "I will attend her birthday dinner Friday." I was already invited. Of course he was. Diane liked witnesses when she believed she controlled what they witnessed. "Bring whatever you believe I need to see," he said. "I have lab documentation." Another pause. "Then do not bring originals unless you have copies secured elsewhere. I already do." "Good." Friday afternoon, I placed everything in a black folder with a clear front sleeve. The lab report was on top. Dr. Mehta's letter was behind it. Then came the symptom calendar, the photo of the leaflet, Caleb's statement, Allison's email, and Sunday dinner texts. I added a written note listing what Diane had access to: our home, my food, medical appointments, family narratives, trust documents, and emergency contact forms. The folder tab read, Diane Whitaker, Exposure Timeline. My handwriting was neat. Too neat. Caleb stood in the bedroom doorway, wearing his dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar. "Are you sure you want to do it there?" he asked. "No." He looked confused. "I do not want to do any of this," I said. "But your mother built her protection in public. She made me defective in front of witnesses. So the correction gets witnesses too." He nodded. His eyes were swollen. He had not slept much. Neither had I. "Where do you want me to sit?" he asked. "With me." It was the first small mercy I gave him. Deanna's birthday dinner was held in the private room at Leland's Steakhouse. Same restaurant as my bridal shower. Same dark wood trim. Same framed wine maps. Same brass sconces throwing warm light over people who could afford to behave badly in private. The table was oval, set for 12. White cloth, heavy silverware, folded cream napkins, water glasses already sweating. A vase of white roses sat in the center, so tall it blocked half the faces across the table. Diane loved centerpieces that made conversation difficult. She sat at the far curve, where the wall behind her displayed a painting of a vineyard. Martin sat to her right. Paul Renner, the attorney, sat 2 seats down. Allison sat across from me, her daughter Emma beside her, shoulders tense under a black cardigan. Caleb sat on my left, not near his mother. Diane noticed. Her eyes moved from him to me, then to the purse on my lap. She smiled. "Caleb, darling, you are so far away." "I am fine here," he said. A bread basket passed. Butter knives clicked against plates. Someone laughed too loudly near the restaurant bar outside the private room. Ice shifted in Martin's glass. Diane wore a cream jacket and pearls. Of course she did. She looked like a woman prepared to be toasted, not confronted. That matters. Villains like Diane do not walk into rooms expecting justice. They expect choreography. The first course arrived. Soup. Tomato bisque in white bowls. I looked at it and almost laughed. Diane watched me lift my spoon. I set it back down. The spoon touched the bowl with a small ceramic tap. Diana's smile did not move, but her eyes sharpened. "Not hungry, Nora. Not for soup." Allison looked at her napkin. Caleb's hand tightened around his water glass. Diane lifted her own spoon and took a delicate taste. "Well," she said, "we all know your stomach has been unpredictable." There it was, the opening note. Martin looked uncomfortable. Paul Renner glanced toward me but said nothing. Dinner moved forward like a staged play with half the cast, realizing the script was wrong. Diane received gifts after the main course, a silk scarf from Allison, golf club covers from Martin because Diane liked practical gifts she could exchange, a framed photo from Emma, who slid it across the table without meeting her grandmother's eyes. Then the cake came in. White frosting, sugared violets, and one gold candle shaped like the number 65. The waiter set it in front of Diane. Plates were stacked at the side. The cake knife lay on a folded napkin, its silver handle catching the light. Diane touched her pearls. I want to say something before we cut this. Of course she did. She stood. Her chair legs whispered against carpet. Everyone looked up. I kept my purse on my lap, one hand on the zipper. Diane smiled around the table. This family has been through a tender season, she began. Fertility struggles affect everyone, not only the couple. They test marriages, expectations, even the way we imagine legacy. Legacy. My body had become a hallway in her family estate. She placed one hand lightly on Martin's shoulder. I am proud of Caleb for his patience. And I am proud of Nora, too, in my way, for beginning to accept that peace sometimes looks different from what we planned. Caleb said, "Mom, stop." Diane looked wounded, perfectly. Oh, darling, I am honoring the truth. My fingers found the folder. The plastic edge was smooth under my thumb. Diane continued. There are many ways to build a meaningful life. Motherhood is not the only measure of a woman. It would have been a beautiful sentence from anyone else. From her, it was a locked door. I stood. Not fast, not dramatic, just stood. The chair moved back with a low scrape against the carpet seam. Deanna's eyes flicked to my purse again. I pulled out the black folder. Paul Renner straightened in his seat. Martin's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Emma's phone buzzed against the table, but she did not reach for it. I walked to Deanna's end of the table and placed the folder beside the cake knife. The plastic sleeve caught a smear of violet frosting from the edge of the cake plate. Deanna's hand came down over it. Too fast, too hard. The paper edge bent under her palm. No one spoke for 3 seconds. Not silence. Objects spoke instead. Ice cracked in Martin's glass. A server outside the room dropped a spoon into a bin. The air conditioner clicked on above the wine painting. Allison inhaled through her nose. I looked at Diana's hand covering the report. Then I said the line I had carried all week. You did not pray for a grandchild, Diane. You managed the evidence against one. Her face changed by inches. The smile stayed first. Then the corners failed. Then the color moved out from under her makeup. What is this? Martin asked. Diane did not lift her hand. That was the first answer. Paul Renner stood. Diane, he said, remove your hand. She laughed once, thin and dry. This is absurd, she said. Then remove your hand, Allison said. Diane looked at her daughter as if she had spoken out of turn in church. Allison. No, Allison said. Move your hand. Caleb stood beside me. His chair hit the wall behind him with a dull tap. Diane lifted her hand slowly. The top page was visible through the clear sleeve. Independent Toxicology Report. My name. Sample. ID. Collection date. Chain of custody. Paul picked it up before Diane could touch it again. He did not read aloud immediately. He adjusted his glasses, scanned the first page, then the second. His mouth tightened. Martin leaned toward him. What is it? Paul said. It is a certified toxicology report. Diane said, Nora has been unstable for months. Caleb's voice cut across hers. Do not. She turned on him. Caleb, you know how emotional she has been. I said, do not. That was the first time in our marriage. I heard him use his adult voice on his mother. Not angry adult. Paul continued reading. The cake candle leaned slightly from the warmth of the room. Wax had begun to soften near the gold edge. Oh. Allison reached for the folder and pulled out Dr. Mehta's letter. Her fingers trembled. "What does this mean?" Martin asked. I answered him, not Diane. "It means I was exposed repeatedly to something that interfered with my treatment. I was not prescribed it. I did not knowingly take it. It matches the months I was getting sick after Sunday dinners." Diane gripped the back of her chair. "Nora has always needed someone to blame." Paul looked up. "Mrs. Whitaker, I strongly recommend you stop speaking casually." That sentence did more damage than shouting. Deanna's mouth opened, then closed. Martin looked at her hand on the chair. "Diane," he said, "what is she talking about?" "She found some paper in a bathroom and built a fantasy around it." I slid the photo across the table. The pharmacy leaflet. White paper. Folded corner. Warning circled in blue ink. Diane stared at it. Not like she had never seen it, but like she hated that I had photographed it. Allison saw that too. "Mom," she said quietly. Diane snapped, "You stay out of this." Emma flinched. That small flinch cost Diane more than she knew. Paul read Caleb's statement next, then Allison's email. When he reached the line about Diane asking whether clinics tested for outside substances, Martin pushed his chair back. The chair leg caught the carpet and jerked. "Diane." She turned toward him. "Martin, do not be ridiculous. I was worried about what Nora might be taking." "Why?" "Because she was desperate." "No," I said. Everyone looked at me. I kept my voice low. I was hopeful. "You needed me desperate. Because desperate women are easy to discredit." Diana's voice thinned. "You have no idea what it is like to watch your only son's life revolve around a woman's obsession." Caleb recoiled. There she was. Not the nurse, not the concerned mother, the owner. "My life?" he said. Diane pointed at me, but her hand was not steady now. "She has consumed you. 4 years of appointments, money, sadness. You stopped visiting unless she felt up to it. You stopped talking about the family trust. You stopped thinking clearly." Paul's eyes moved sharply at the words, family trust. So did mine. I had included the trust documents because Diana's control was never only emotional. She sat on committees. She held keys. She knew passwords Martin no longer remembered. She managed calendars, signatures, and access. Diane saw Paul notice and tried to retreat. "I mean the family's future," she said quickly. Martin stood. Not fully at first. His hands pressed on the tablecloth, wrinkling it under his fingers. "What did you give her?" Diana's face hardened. "I did not give her anything," Paul said. "That is not the question I would answer without counsel." Diane looked at him with pure betrayal. "You are our attorney. I am the family attorney," he said. "Not your shield." A water glass sat untouched near Diana's plate. Condensation slid down and made a ring on the tablecloth. The first loss happened right there, reputation and control. Not because everyone understood the science. They did not. Because they understood her reaction. The hand over the report. The over-explaining. The way she attacked me instead of asking what had happened. The way she said desperate before anyone else did. Witnesses stopped protecting her. You could see it physically. Allison moved her chair closer to Emma. Caleb stepped beside me. Paul kept the folder in his own hands. Martin stopped looking at Diane like a wife and started looking at her like a locked cabinet he had just found in his house. Then came the second loss. Relationship. Martin removed his napkin from his lap, folded it once, and placed it beside his plate. The motion was small, almost polite. "Diane," he said, "give me your house keys." She stared at him. "What?" "The extra keys." "To Caleb and Nora's house. To Allison's. To the trust office." Her laugh broke. "Martin, do not humiliate me." He held out his hand. "You did that yourself." She looked around the table, searching for the old family reflex. Someone to soften him. Someone to tell him this was too much. Someone to make me the problem again. No one did. Emma looked at her lap. Allison's jaw was set. Caleb did not move. Paul closed the folder. Diane reached into her purse. The keys came out in a silver cluster with a white enamel charm shaped like a house. They landed in Martin's palm with a hard little clatter. That sound was better than applause. The third loss began the next morning, but its shape appeared at that table. Paul told Martin in front of everyone that Diane's access to medical decision documents, trust files, and household emergency permissions needed immediate review. Diane said, "You cannot do that over a family tantrum." Paul held up the folder. "This is not a tantrum." I almost sat down then. My knees felt tired, not weak, just tired. Like I had been carrying furniture for years and had only now realized I could put it down. But Diane was not finished. People like her rarely surrender when truth arrives. They try to rename it. She looked at Caleb. "I did everything for you." He shook his head. "No, you did it because you thought my life belonged to you." Her face twisted. "I wanted you free." His voice cracked. "From my wife? From this endless grief." I said, "You do not get to cure grief by creating it." She looked at me then with something close to hatred. Not hot hatred, cold. The kind that had been sitting at Sunday dinner for years, wearing pearls. "You were never strong enough for this family," she said. There was the old wound, spoken plainly at last. I looked at the cake, the sugared violets, the report folder in Paul's hand, and the keys in Martin's palm. Then I said, "And yet I am the one who brought proof." That ended the dinner. Not neatly. No one ate cake. The waiter came in once, saw faces instead of celebration, and backed out with the coffee pot still in his hand. Diane stayed seated as everyone else stood. Her cream jacket looked too bright under the sconces. Martin left with Paul. Allison took Emma. Caleb walked me to the car. Rain had started again, fine and cold. The parking lot lights made every drop look silver. When we reached the passenger door, Caleb said, "I am sorry." I held the keys Martin had given me. Our house key was on Diana's ring. I removed it with my fingernail. The metal ring fought me, then gave. "I know," I said. He waited. I did not comfort him. That was new for both of us. The next morning, I filed a police report. Not because I expected instant justice. I did not. I filed because official records matter. The officer at the desk was a woman with tired eyes and a coffee stain near the edge of her sleeve. She listened without interrupting. She took copies of the lab report, the doctor's letter, the symptom calendar, the photo, and the statements. The copier behind her flashed green with each page. She stamped the top sheet. Received. The stamp was blue. Date, time, case number. She slid my copy back through the window. "Keep this," she said. "I will." Later that day, Paul called. Diane had been removed from active access to the family trust pending review. Her authorization on medical decision documents for Martin had been suspended. Her name had been removed from emergency contact forms for Caleb's household. Locks at the trust office were being changed. Exact things, not everything. Enough. Enough to remove her hands from other people's lives. When Caleb told me Diane had called him 17 times, I asked if he answered. No. Good. She left voicemails. Save them. He did. That was the shape of our marriage for a while. Not repaired, documented. He started therapy 2 weeks later. I did too, separately. We slept in the same house, but not always in the same room. Some nights he reached for my hand and I let him hold it. Some nights I moved away. Both were honest. Dr. Mehta paused treatment for 1 full cycle while my body stabilized. She said it gently, but honestly, there was no miracle ultrasound at the end of that month. No sudden reward wrapped in a pink blanket. Life is not that clean. But my labs began to settle. My calendar stopped looking like a crime scene. And the green room at the back of the house stopped feeling like Diane's witness stand. One afternoon, I opened the closet and took out the boxed crib. Not to assemble it, not yet. I moved it to the center of the room and dusted the top with a cloth. The cardboard smelled faintly like storage and old hope. Then I placed the certified lab report, sealed in its evidence envelope, inside the top drawer of the dresser. Not hidden, stored. There is a difference. A week later, Diane sent a letter, handwritten, cream stationery. Of course. She did not apologize. She wrote about misunderstanding, emotional strain, maternal fear, and measures taken out of concern. She wrote that someday I might understand what it felt like to watch your child suffer. I read it once at the kitchen table. Caleb sat across from me. The clock ticked above the doorway. When I finished, I slid it to him. He read it, then covered his eyes. She still thinks she is the victim, he said. No, I said. She thinks victimhood is the last room she can control. I place a letter in the red folder. Then I change the lock on the back door. I did it myself. The new key was brass, sharp-edged, and still stiff from the hardware store. The deadbolt clicked into place with a clean, final sound. Caleb stood behind me on the porch. "Can I have one?" he asked. I looked at him. He swallowed. "I mean, when you are ready. That was better." I put the key in my pocket. Inside the house, the green bedroom waited. The yellow sweater was still folded in tissue paper. The future was still uncertain. But uncertainty did not belong to Diane anymore. That was the victory. Not revenge, not forgiveness, clean certainty. My body was not a family project. My grief was not a weakness. She could season and serve back to me. My marriage was not her inheritance. My silence was not consent. Not. And the proof object she tried to smother with her hand at that birthday table now sat in a sealed envelope with a stamp, a case number, and my name spelled correctly. Nora. Elaine Whitaker. Received, documented, believed.